if we just look at science as a process instead of what science comes up with as a model of the universe, then we see the same patterns as what's described in the Bible. In fact, if anyone today that has more of a scientific mind wants to understand the story of Adam and Eve, you should read it as a scientist. So Adam is like a scientist who's trying to understand reality and try to impose his theory upon reality. So that is, Adam names the animals. That means he's trying to impose meaning on reality. And then this answers kind of the question, why did God create Eve in the narrative of Adam and Eve? Because that's actually a good question. He might have just created the man without the woman, right? But if you're a scientist, you can easily understand that, because the reason why he creates Eve is to counter what Adam is doing. And it's pretty clear in the language. If you read it in the original Hebrew, there's a lot of hints to that. So what happens when God creates Eve? He puts Adam to sleep. Okay, what does that mean? It means it's an attempt to renew Adam. Okay, so he loses consciousness. So sleep is like a little taste of death, basically. It's like a cyclical thing where you lose your ability to control and to name and to command things. So that's what happens when we fall asleep. Our mind loses the command of the body, right? So that it's like a counterpoint to what Adam just did. Adam just names the animals. He's naming everything. He's using his authority to say, this is the name of this phenomenon. This is it. This is like a scientist who has a theory and he's seeing if it works, and it's working. And then it says it's not good that Adam is alone, basically. Because why? Because he needs a feedback mechanism for what he's doing, for his naming. Because he can name phenomenon, but he can't name himself. He can't see himself. Because he has a perspective. He's using his own perspective to view the world. But then he never bothers to, or he can't, rather, look at himself. So what he needs is what's called sometimes a foreign perspective, okay? So he needs, this is what Eve represents. So he falls asleep, and then it says God took his side and built a woman into it. See, the word for side also means stumbling stone. See, so the side that he took, it also means a stumbling stone. So that is exactly what it is. But it's a good stumbling stone. And this is very important.
Well, Ben Shapiro told me that the original Hebrew for what's translated as helpmeet in the King James Version is actually something like beneficial adversary.
It's because it says God created a help against him. That's literally what it says, a help against him. But obviously, the purpose of God creating Eve is not to destroy Adam. This is a pretty obvious thing. But because if we look at the narrative and we give importance to each of the events, it starts with God saying, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil or you will die. And then right away it says, it's not good that man is alone. So you see, it's directly related. The creation of Eve is related to the fact that he just told him, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of evil or you will die. And then, okay, Adam names all the animals, but he doesn't find a help as his opposite. You see, he doesn't find his opposite. He needs his opposite to see himself. That's the idea. He needs like a mirror to look into where he sees an inverse image of himself. So the left and the right are flipped.
Women really do. This would be associated with their association with the serpent in the Garden of Eden, as well as women really do provide a critical mirror for men. And that's partly because they're hypergamous. And so women judge men more harshly in many ways than men judge women. Now, it's ambivalent, but there's some truth in it. So, for example, on dating sites, women rate 80% of men as below average in attractiveness, whereas men rate 50% of women as below average as in attractiveness in relationship to potential short-term or long-term mating. And so and it's clearly the case that Eve becomes self-conscious in the story of Adam and Eve and then makes Adam self-conscious. the scales fall from both their eyes, and now they can see their own nakedness. And their own nakedness is, in some deep sense, their own vulnerability. And so Eve provides, as you pointed out, a corrective reflection of Adam. And you're also stating, and this must have something to do with the association between Eve and the serpent, because the serpent is the thing that lurks in the well-ordered place. And there's always something that lurks in the well-ordered place, because no matter how much order you establish, and that would be true of a scientific theory, there's also always something left over that speaks of the infinite that isn't encapsulated within your theory. And Eve is allied with that force in Genesis and is the root to self-consciousness for men. And that seems to me, again, from a scientific perspective, pretty damn accurate. And then you might think as well that part of the reason that women make men self-conscious is because they're mediators between men and infants. And because women become pregnant and because they give birth to extremely dependent and fragile infants, they are more conscious of life's catastrophe and tragedy and more conscious of the necessity of knowledge serving life, and always serve as a reminder to men that their capacity for abstraction and naming, let's say, isn't sufficient to exhaust the proper possibilities of life, that all that abstraction still has to serve life.
Yes, exactly. She represents the opposite of Adam, really. That's exactly what it is. It's actually pretty, once you know these things, you can see it very clearly in this story. So, like I said, Adam, his job is to name the animals. So what does Eve do? She listens to the animals. That's one way to see it. So why is she talking to the snake? This is a question nobody asks themselves, which is interesting. People sometimes say, wait, why is this snake talking in this story? Because that's obviously an anomaly. I mean, snakes don't talk, right? So why is this snake talking? But the real question they should be asking themselves is, how can Eve understand the snake? How does Eve know how to understand what the snake is saying? Because that's what Eve has. Adam has the ability to name the animals. So this is what you are, this is what you are. And it's a general, it's a way to symbolize the general idea of assigning meaning to things or imposing meaning upon things. And what Eve does is she does the opposite. She mediates with the earth. That means with matter that has no meaning or that has not been given meaning, and also with things that Adam has named, but that are not satisfied with the meaning that Adam has given. So we can actually think that that's what the snake is up to a little bit in the story. So it represents basically, so we can say Eve is mediating the perspective of the earth or of nature. So this story is really, really deep. I mean, it represents basically the right wing and the left wing. If you look at it at a bigger scale, at a political scale, Adam is the traditional perspective. He represents, we have tradition, we have the past, we have our insights from the past, and we order things according to that. So that's what Adam is doing. Eve really represents the left wing. She represents, I'm going to listen to nature, and if it doesn't agree with what Adam is doing, I'm going to try to mediate that. So the ecological movement represents basically what Eve is doing. It represents the feminine aspect as described in the story. So it's about, maybe the snake is not happy with the name that Adam gave the snake. You see what I'm saying? But it's just a general symbol for anything that you can impose meaning upon, can then turn around and say, complain about it. No, I disagree.
Can you believe that Good Friday and Easter are just around the corner? These are the most important holidays in Christianity, and Lent is our time to prepare our hearts. Lent is traditionally a time where Christians grow closer to God through prayer, fasting, and giving to others. And guess what? Hallow has created an amazing way to do just that with their Lent Prayer 40 challenge called The Way. Don't worry if you haven't started yet, it's definitely not too late. This challenge helps us remember that Jesus is the way to heaven, showing us that true peace, love, and joy require genuine sacrifice. You'll love this. Mark Wahlberg and Chris Pratt are leading some incredible challenges about sacrifice and surrender. Jonathan Rumi and Sister Miriam James will guide you through these powerful stories and prayer experiences. And Father Mike Schmitz, his Sunday sermons are absolutely spectacular. This is already shaping up to be Hallow's biggest Lent ever, with thousands of people from all over the world joining together in prayer. Here's the best part. You can get 3 months completely free when you sign up at hallow.com/Jordan. That covers the entire Lent challenge. Once you join, you'll discover a huge catalog of guided prayers, meditations, music, and so much more, all designed to help you grow closer to God and find the peace that we're all looking for. So download the Hallow app today and jump into the Lent Prayer 40 challenge. Your spirit will thank you.
I mean, every phenomena has a finite aspect that's categorizable and that can be subdued and brought into a kind of cognitive order, but it has a transcendent element that constantly escapes from that and that has to be taken into account. And the problem with imposing an order that's final on anything is that you lose the connection to the transcendent. And then you can think about that on an even broader scale, which of course you've done, which is that the garden that Adam and Eve inhabit, where everything is named, is a kind of order that's imposed, and it's reasonably well balanced, but there's still always that possibility that something that hasn't been taken into account yet is going to upset the apple cart. And then there's an even broader possibility that in the highest possible sense, that it's good that the apple cart gets upset because it produces an advance towards the next stage. There is a sense in which, and Christianity makes this, the Christian corpus of thought makes this quite clear, there's an aspect in which the fall from paradise is a cosmic cataclysm and that it propels human beings into the suffering of history. But it's also the precondition for the emergence of the higher order that's symbolized by the voluntary sacrifice of Christ as a culmination of the entire biblical narrative. And there's some implication there that to become innocent once again, like we were in the Garden of Paradise, but to be self-conscious and knowledgeable as adults at the same time is actually better than the kind of unconscious paradisal state that we inhabited before we became self-conscious, let's say in the Garden of Eden. I think it was T.S. Eliot who said something like, we need to return to the beginning and know the place for the first time. And that's the fundamental theme of the, let's say, the Exodus narrative, where there's a fall from tyranny into the desert and then a movement toward the promised land. But it's the meta-narrative of the entire Bible, and it's something like a description of the structure of cognitive and conceptual revolutions towards a higher and higher form of unification, differentiation, and plenitude. That might be a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, there's definitely. This is the thing. The fall, though, is not a good thing. But I understand what you're getting at. Every piece of the puzzle that you're describing was there in the garden. So if Eve wasn't there, then there'd be a problem. She's there, though. She is there to mediate with the serpent. So the sin of Eve and the sin of Adam is not that they listened to the serpent, is that was a good thing, actually. You have to listen to the serpent. But the serpent tricked them. That's the whole thing. And how does it work? I mean, there's certain facts or certain puzzles that we don't have the ability to solve yet. Okay? And then when you try to integrate those facts into your system, but you don't have the ability to solve them yet, then it causes some problems. Because once you have inside of you or inside of your system something that is against you, but not in a good way, like I was talking about Eve. Eve is like she represents something like the curse that's good for you. The curse that loves you, right? She criticizes, but she loves her husband. So it's a loving criticism. It's a loving complaint. But that's extremely dangerous in a sense, because you can also encounter the curse that wants to kill you. And this is often something, I mean, you don't want to have your enemy, integrate your enemy inside of you if you don't have what it takes to give him an identity that he'll accept. So this basically is, if you want to take it as a scientist, a good example of this process would be the difference between like Newton and Einstein. That's actually, to me, that is an example of the story of Adam and Eve.